who was with us for 3 very happy years in his retirement. Although I think those years of retirement taught us more about life as a Christian disciple than any of us got anyplace else. So in his memory, we wanted to set up a series where we continue to talk about the things that matter to us as Christian disciples. So we're very happy to welcome this evening, and Jay, I'll give a little bit of a graphical sketch of Carrie as you work with them. So welcome, Carrie.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to welcome Carrie Weber from America Magazine to be with us tonight. Carrie is one of the executive directors at America Magazine, where she's worked for the last 10 years. She is the author of a very cool book that's on the front table as you came in, called Mercy in the City: How to Feed the Hungry, Give Drink to the Thirsty, Visit the Imprisoned, and Keep Your Day Job. It received a 2014 Christopher Award, as well as awards from Catholic Press Association and the Association of Catholic Publishers. She has served as a co-host of America This Week, which is a radio program on Sirius XM. In 2013, she reported from Rwanda as a recipient of Catholic Relief Services Egan Journalism Fellowship, recognizing excellence in Catholic media. She's a graduate of Providence College and Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. From 2004 to 2005, she volunteered through the Mercy Volunteer Corps as a special education teacher on a Navajo reservation in St. Michael's, Arizona. Carrie's been a Mercy Associate since 2012. She's a past board member of the Catholic Press Association and a current board member of the Ignatian Solidarity Network. I had the opportunity to have a cup of coffee with Carrie a week ago and just discovered that there are a lot of points of commonality in both of our lives, and I really looked forward so much to introducing her to St. Francis de Sales Parish and introducing you all to Carrie. So thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your community tonight. I'm really very honored to be here and really appreciative. I have a couple little slides for you. I'm not sure you can see the words on the slides from there. So I will try to describe things for you if necessary, or you can have me you can flip through them afterwards if you want the details. But I want to talk a bit about, as the topic indicates, women in the church, but I want to be clear ahead of time what I mean about that. And part of what I'm going to be speaking about is some data that we collected at America Magazine. Now, America is a national review of faith and culture published by the Jesuits of the U.S. and Canada, and we have a website, a radio station, show, films, etc. But one of the things that we did in the last year or so was this survey, and it's a survey of American Catholic women that we released in partnership with CARA, the Center for Applied Research and Apostolate at Georgetown University. And so I'm going to be speaking a little bit about that data, and I know that sounds probably like crushingly dull, but what I think that what comes from that is a story, and is a picture of the experience of Catholic women in the church today as told by Catholic women. Because one of the things that we realized when I came up with this idea for the survey was there wasn't a survey asking what Catholic women thought about various topics in a comprehensive way, and a lot of people still say, well, Catholic women X, Catholic women Y, and so we thought, let's ask Catholic women and let them say what it is they feel about various aspects of church, parish, collegial life. And so, whoops, I think I shut myself off. Or maybe the battery. Yeah. Okay. So I want to say the context in which I'm speaking from. I can speak from professional experience as a woman who's worked for the church on and off since I was 16 years old. I can speak personally and anecdotally. Thank you very much. As just someone trying to live out my Catholic faith, because I frequently hear from people who are trying to do the same. But let me also be clear about what I'm not doing, and I'm not claiming that I personally represent all Catholic women or all the opinions of all Catholic women, and I'm not saying that there are no Catholic women who have had experiences outside of what our data has shown. You very likely know someone who disagrees with what is here or with me, or you might disagree with me, and that's fine, and I'm happy to have those conversations too. And so, and finally, one caveat, I've gathered this data, I helped report on this data. I'm not a statistician, so if you have questions about like standard deviations of things, call Kara. But I want to talk about the bigger picture here. Because I really am proud that America, the magazine I work for, felt it important enough to kind of pursue this data. And I want to tell you a little bit about Paul itself. So we surveyed 1,508 women who self-identified as Catholic in the United States. And they completed the survey in either English or Spanish. And they gave a picture of the 37.3 million Catholic women in the US at the time. And about 28.8 million of that represents adult women. So we came in with this data. We have a few takeaways from it. And the first question that women had to ask or answer when they were met with the survey was, are you Catholic? And they all said yes. Now, after that, there was a really wide variety of answers to all of these other questions. As you probably know, either being or having met Catholic women, they are not one unanimous, giant, same thing, right? Women have a wide variety of opinions in the world and very much within the church. Now, the big takeaway, actually, that we found from this parish is that a lot of the Catholic women that we surveyed are actually very happy to identify as Catholic, but not particularly engaged with their faith or the parish life. And now that is not, obviously people who are engaged might find that surprising or say, but I know, X number of people who are, and that's true. But it was a bit of a wake-up call for how the church might want to operate and evangelize in the context of this data and in the context of our culture. So Mass attendance, first of all, varies pretty widely among Catholic women. So about a quarter of Catholic women go to Mass once a week or more. About a quarter attend less than weekly, but at least once a month. About a quarter a few times a year, and about a quarter rarely or never. Women who are in the millennial and post-Vatican II generations were less likely than older women to attend Mass at least once a week. So we have about half of Catholic women kind of regularly going to Mass, and then we asked the women to also say whether particular aspects of the Catholic faith were important to their own identity. They talked about things like supportive communities, leadership opportunities, positive role models in the faith. These were all helpful in maintaining a connection to one's faith. But the two things that were most important to Catholic women were helping the poor, as important to Catholic women as an aspect of the faith. Helping the poor, 79% of women said somewhat or very much, and receiving the Eucharist, 69% said somewhat or very much. So I find this interesting because these numbers are probably, you probably want both of these to be like 100% in level of interest. And we talk to people about, so where are you getting your model of what it looks like to be a Catholic woman? And most people said that their main source for that was friends, family, parents, people immediately around us, which makes total sense, right? So many people would name the people closest to them as some of those models. People also said religious education, scripture, women religious, no one in particular, themselves. So there's a range. But one also expressed the frustration that they had a hard time finding these models, even within their friends and family, of kind of picturing what does it mean to be Catholic and a woman in the church today. There's a couple things at play here, which I kind of found interesting. So as we discussed, maybe 50% of Catholic women are not engaged in the parish life, so that eliminates some source for some people if you're going to parish or if you're not, who are looking as it doesn't eliminate them as models, because you can be a good Catholic model and not necessarily being at a parish every week, but it means that you might not have those touch points of engagement with people on a regular basis. And it's interesting also because a lot of people feel that women are the backbone of parish life, and in many places that's absolutely true. But the actual data, the actual percentage of Catholic women making up those positions is low as a percentage of the whole. So it's sort of another interesting aspect. And then in my own reporting, a lot of Catholic women who are involved are not eager to hold themselves up as a model. They put their heads down, do good work, do a good job, and really hesitant to even say, yes, of course, yeah, I'm a role model for some Catholic women. Say, no, I'm a servant leader, I serve alongside, I don't want to bring myself up. And this is all true, and that's good, and you can be a servant leader, but you can also be a servant leader and a role model, even if you don't see yourself as one. But I think it brings up an interesting aspect of like, so what is then, where do people find these sort of models? Because there's this idea of it's hard to be what you can't see, in the sense of if you don't know that something's a possibility for you, then you don't know that might be a way to live out your life. And so if you're one young woman looking for a role model, you might have a hard time finding them unless your friends or family are, or any age, unless your friends or family are some of these women who are involved in parish, who are in these leadership positions. And then a lot of leadership positions for women in the church are sort of those behind-the-scenes roles. Even if they're high-power roles like a chief financial officer for a diocese or a superintendent in schools, chancellor, these are all roles that women can hold within sort of the official church structures that a lot of people don't even know exist. So that is sort of can be an obstacle for people who are looking for official ways to kind of but like say, I really like the church, I like to serve in the church in maybe a professional capacity, but I don't see what that looks like. And obviously there's a lot of really wonderful models here. But in order to see that, you have to come here. And so if half of the women aren't coming here, then how do you see that? It's hard. It can be really hard. One opportunity that's talked about a lot lately are women deacons. So we found in the survey 6 in 10 Catholic women support the possibility for women to be ordained as deacons. 1 in 5 indicated that they may support women deacons, but want to learn more first. And the 12% they said they didn't know what they felt like about it, and 7% said they would not support it. So support for women deacons was more likely among women with more education, among Democrats, and among those who attend Mass less often. And women deacons received less support from women with less education among Republicans and frequent Mass goers. So it's an interesting kind of split. But it doesn't mean that is, down the line. I'm sure there are people from all parts of those groups that feel differently about it. So and it's interesting in light of a survey that the bishops then took about women deacons, where just 33% of bishops in the U.S. thought the church should ordain women as deacons, because even if it's sort of approved, then it goes down to the bishop's level, and then they have to make those decisions, and then it goes to sort of the local churches. However, a lot of the bishops felt that having women help at liturgical celebrations, at word ministries and charity ministries would be somewhat or very helpful. So it's interesting because, and this is 61, 71, 83%. So the roles that a deacon, a woman deacon might fill, are of use to the church in the eyes of the bishops. And 97% said they believe somewhat or strongly that their diocese is committed to increasing women's involvement in ecclesial leadership. The women that we surveyed felt a little differently at the parish level. So 18% felt that women were very much involved in decision-making at their parish, and rises to 53% if you include those who said somewhat involved. And It's interesting because for women who attend Mass more frequently, the percentage who agreed very much was 32% versus 11% who attended less frequently, perhaps indicating that those who went to Mass more frequently were just more aware of the women in some of the leadership roles as well, and might even be the ones making those decisions. The question of sexism in the church also was asked in the survey, and 1 in 10 Catholic women responded yes to the question of whether they had ever personally experienced sexism in the Catholic Church. And I get a lot of people expressing surprise at that, which is interesting because it's not something that you want people to expect to be higher, right? But the women who answered yes were asked to kind of elaborate, and their responses described experiences of sexism ranging from, being left out of parish ministries to sexual abuse. These are a few more steps, to deacons. And, I mean, the good news is that overall this is a minority of Catholic women who feel this. The bad news is anyone who's experiencing sexism in the church.
Can you define sexism as they thought about it?
So we asked, they were able to elaborate on their answers, right? So the question said, have you ever experienced sexism in the church, personally experienced sexism in the church? So there's a few aspects of this that I think might influence how somebody might answer. And one of those things is, there was a free response section, and so after you said that you could elaborate, so many of the women who responded named structural elements of the church as something that they felt were sexist. But it's also possible that some women interpreted this, because of the way it was worded, more narrowly, right? So they said, have you ever personally felt experienced sexism? So they may have said, well, there's a structure here that excludes people who want to do this, but I don't want to do that, so that doesn't affect me personally, and so, no. Or, I heard that someone's, father said something to so-and-so, but he didn't say it to me, so no. So it could be a way that the numbers could be higher if people interpret this more broadly. The other thing that is interesting is that among sort of subgroups, there are certain groups that were more likely to say that they had experienced sexism. And so those were people who attended a Catholic college or university, 25% said yes. Those who considered becoming a religious sister or a nun, 23%. Those who attended a Catholic high school at 16%, and those who served in a parish ministry role, 15%. So they all said that they felt that they had experienced sexism. So this is higher than the total percentage. So it's possible that this is also influenced by the fact that if only half of Catholic women are showing up at a parish on a regular basis, that half also doesn't experience some of the potentially negative interactions that would be considered sexist because their interactions are very infrequent, right? So that might skew some of the numbers in a sense. So that's. Is that helpful?
Yeah. I don't understand what sexism in the Catholic Church looks like. I know. Give examples?
So, we allowed women to elaborate. So it was anything from saying you couldn't be a part of a liturgical ministry to feeling like they were sexually harassed to, it was up to the woman to self-define how they experienced that sexism. So it could be any number of things. So that can influence things as well. Yes?
I don't know if this would help, but any experience that I have had or a woman has had, and you have been excluded because you're a woman in the church, because you're a woman, and you can see that, I think that would be an experience of that you have been, that has been because of sexism.
Yeah.
And that happens all the time in every aspect and in many places. And all women can have, I think all women would have stories to tell about that in their life, whether they're 80 years old, whether they're 20, or whether they're whatever, how old they are. So yes, so I don't know if that helps us the conversation of what she asked about how would you define what the women were answering when they were asked about what is sexism?
Well, I think the question in itself, it doesn't define it, right? So there's a flaw in the survey, perhaps, in that we can say, were you ever, excluded from a ministry because you were a woman? We say, did you ever experience? So it could be, unfortunately, there is a very, very large number of ways in which women can experience sexism in the church.
And be excluded.
Sure, yeah, exactly. And being excluded is one of them. And so it's up to women, and it's up to women as they are self-defining to say, actually, he excluded me, but it was because, I don't know, he was a jerk, not because I was a woman. Or to say in their own whatever, to explain their own situations in whatever way they've experienced them. And so that would influence how people would answer. Because a lot of people are really surprised by this answer, which is disheartening, right? Because everyone's like, wait, the Catholic Church is way more sexist than that. And that's not like a response that you really want to have as a church. But this is the numbers that we have. And so it leads to, interesting conversations like this of how do you define that? And what does that mean to you? And what does that actually look like in the church? And actually, maybe that was sexist and you excluded it, or maybe he made a mistake and it really had nothing to do with you and you interpreted it in a certain way. So there's all sorts of ways that this can manifest itself. But the fact that the people who are in these sort of subcategories are more likely to be involved in church and have more touch points of it, and then are saying that they have experienced this more is a disheartening thing. Now, we also talked about Catholic women as sort of a potential political force. And let's see, it might be too small. But we asked them, how important certain issues were to them, and whether the aspects of church teaching affected the way that they would choose to vote. And the issues that Catholic women said they considered while they were voting were actually pretty neatly aligned with a lot of what church priorities are, at least in terms of things that Pope Francis or the bishops are coming out about, or Catholic social teaching. So the 83% that the environment was a big issue, migration and the treatment of refugees, 77%, abortion, 76%. These were the top three sort of political issues that Catholic women spoke about. And the interesting thing about that is that given the number of Catholic women out there, and the fact that 74% of them had planned to vote in the midterm elections, Catholic women are a pretty powerful voting bloc. They're not necessarily all going to vote the same way, but there's a lot going on there, a huge number. 6 out of 10 identified or lean Democratic, and 38% identify or lean Republican. But what the data shows is that there could be in certain congressional districts within this population, someone like a pro-life Democrat would be a viable option. Which is something a lot of people don't think is even politically feasible these days, but within the context of Catholic women voters, a lot of women would be open to that option. Yes.
I just had a question. Were these answers the selections that you gave to them? And then I had a question, was economic inequality or economic issues, issues of economic justice, was that one of the options they were given?
Yes, these are the options they were given to choose among. There might have been a different question that involved the economy, but not in this one.
Okay.
So yeah, these are what they could choose among.
These were selected for them. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
And they had to say, are these important to you or not? So they didn't have to rank them, or they didn't have to say they were important. They could just say, no, none of these. And yeah, so these are what we're done. And so interestingly, I think 18% of adult Catholic women, with all of this, have considered leaving the church at some point. 6% said they did leave for a time, but now self-identify as Catholic, and 12% had considered leaving, but chose to stay. One of the most common reasons was disagreement with the church's stance on some issue at 39%. Other reasons including being attracted to another faith, having an issue with their local parish, their perceived hypocrisy of the church, the sex abuse scandal, and this question was before this summer. So that was an issue even when the most recent cases were from 2002. Now, I guess the good news in that is that 82% of Catholic women have not considered leaving the church, right? So that's good news for the church. But the challenging news overall is that, given the other stats, there's evidence that some people might feel, be staying more like, not necessarily inspired, but kind of like, not out of inspiration, but out of inertia. And it's not to say that their connection is not genuine, but that the church isn't really having like a tangible impact on how somebody sort of lives their life on a day-to-day basis. And it's not necessarily because the woman isn't trying, it might be because of any number of reasons. And so in the end, 68% of Catholic women agreed that strongly or somewhat that they are proud to be Catholic. And I interviewed a lot of women for an article on women in leadership in the church that came out of some of this data. And one of the themes that arose in those interviews was the idea of the church as one's home. And I think home is a really good way to describe it, because home is this place where we can kind of always come back and we can feel really welcome. And that is, I think, a big part of why people stay, right? When a lot of women, and why a lot of these women are willing to tell like a total stranger or an internet survey, yeah, I'm Catholic, long after they're connected to a parish or, because you can't change where you're from, right? And it's also this feeling of why, I think it also explains why feeling rejected or disappointed by the church can hurt so much, because this is our home and this is where we're supposed to feel the most welcome and the most ourselves. So I think there's no single answer to how to sort of more fully engage Catholic women that are, 50% who don't really feel connected to the community. But what we have to start to do, I think, is to make people feel at home. And that's not the same as making people feel comfortable or complacent or self-assured, but welcome with all of our mistakes, with all of our misgivings. It doesn't mean we can't offer each other, advice or corrections, but it does mean that we cannot say that what you feel does not matter. Because emotions are real, suffering is real, and the people of our church, in the midst of all of the beauty and the solidarity that it has to offer, we have too often just caused each other so much great suffering. And, as in any relationship, that suffering can prompt, is this worth it? Or worse, I think, is you stop wondering at all, right? You let this relationship kind of just fade away because it seems irrelevant. But still, we all have this prophetic and this royal mission that Christians share by virtue of our baptism that requires us to really try as hard as possible while relying on the grace of God to point each other to this definitive reason to say, yes, because I do think it's worth it. Because this community, this communion, the commitment that the church provides for us, however imperfectly at times, it points us to the God that knows our true worth, to the one who welcomes us back and who always says yes when we ask to come home. Thank you.
Well, this is an opportunity for anybody who would like to ask a couple of questions, clarifying questions of Carrie. The floor is open for a few minutes. Oh.
I just wanted you to tell me again how many women were in this survey?
1,508 women.
Thank you.
So it doesn't, given that there's 37 million Catholic women, it seems like, a small sample, but it is a statistically significant survey. It's actually a very good size for a survey.
So my question is, what was the demographic?
urban, rural?
So we worked with a company that does a survey that has a population. It is able to randomly select people that are a representative sample of the United States. So geographically, demographically, and it's also done largely online. They provide any materials needed for people who might not have the internet or anything like that at their house. So it tries to level for socioeconomic challenges, and it also lends itself, interestingly, to more honest answers because it's done. It's generally anonymous, but you're not talking to somebody. So if you're talking to somebody on the phone and they say, "Hey, how often do you have an ass?" You might be more likely to say to somebody on the phone, go, every week, or whatever. Whereas on the internet, they find people are like, oh, it's like never, more. So it lends itself to be, the answers to be more true than not.
Oh, so I'm sorry, follow-up. Did you look at the data based on any demographic, like age or rural versus urban?
Yeah, so we have a lot of breakdowns in the survey. You can find it on our website if you want to look into it in detail, because I think it is really useful for people in parishes and in ministry. And the data, it's not statistic. There were no statistically significant differences for geography, really. But age, there are a number of breakdowns between sort of millennials, Vatican II, post-Vatican II, for sure.
So I know you stated that millennials are like less likely to go to church compared to older people. Why do you think that is? And do you think the Catholic Church can do anything to bring millennials back into the church?
Yeah, I mean, if I could answer that question, that would be, I don't know what, the Vatican tomorrow, I guess. But I think...
Can you repeat the question?
Sure, yeah, the question is that millennials were less likely to attend Mass. What could be done about that, perhaps? And I was just reading elsewhere about the tendency among the millennial generation to form sort of communities of our own. I guess technically, I'm like the very, very end of the millennial, or beginning, or whatever it is, early, old millennial, I think. Is to form communities sort of their own. So a lot of us are not necessarily drawn to the parish life. And so that's a different change from like earlier generations. My grandmother and my mother, like the parish is where like literally everything happened. And you obviously have a very vibrant parish community here. And I think there are people that do find that, but there are, I think there's a lot of people who are sort of like very mobile, right? So they go from town to town or neighborhood to neighborhood in the city. I mean, I've been here in the city area. I probably went to 4 different parishes for a couple of years each while I was living in the city for various reasons. And it was never like a protest. It was just like, oh, well, I moved to this neighborhood, or they asked me to be in this different ministry. And so even people who want to be involved tend to move from place to place. So that's a part of it. And I think one challenge just as of late is that a lot of people in the millennial generation are experiencing the sex abuse crisis sort of as adults for the first time. This is, they were young or in 2002 when this news was first breaking, and so this is something that's also sort of a challenge to people who really, as everyone does, desire authenticity, and that doesn't convey authenticity.
All right, so this, maybe I missed it, but you've done this research and you've collected all of this wonderful data. Your sample size is very good, considering. So what's next? I mean, you're taking this information and now who and what and where do you apply the findings and the results? what's going to happen? How are you going to engage more women who are Catholics in their particular parishes?
Yeah.
How do you change sexism? How, I can tell you, but.
Okay. And the last one is a really heavy add-on there. So I think, so the two questions are, what are we going to do with the data and how do we stop sexism? The first no.
I was being glib.
Yeah, no, I know. Me too. But I think they're both important questions. So the data, so we did an entire issue of the magazine based around this data and extrapolated from it some of the bigger issues around women in leadership, women in politics, and tried to unpack some of the bigger points and takeaways from it. And that all is available at AmericanMagazine.org. But we're also trying to work on how to make this useful to parishes. Because there is something here that I think what we're thinking of doing, and we're just talking about this, is like discussion guides or, you know, booklets. We have, you know, executive summary. I'm actually interested if you think, if you can tell me what would be useful to people at a parish as to how to use this data and make it that way and make it useful to you, we want to do that because we want this to get out there. I mean, it's available to anyone who wants it for free right now, but we want to help make it more easily digestible, and we want to help people use it to further ministry. It's not just to sit there as numbers and then to say, oh, well, that's kind of too bad, or oh, look at that's encouraging. Right. You know, and so we're, you know, thinking now about ways in which that might work its way into parish life in a meaningful way. Right now we're thinking like material resources that people could download or use in groups and parishes. But if you have ideas, I would love to hear them. And hopefully some of these, I spoke about this with some women at a different conference, and they said, well, good, I'm going to take this data and I'm going to go hit my pastor over the head with it and tell him, like, look, this is how people feel. You know, one of the things that was interesting about how welcome, there's a question about how welcome people felt. Let me see if I can get out of here. So this is how much do you agree with how welcome these different groups feel in your parish? And so this could be a really good guide for people. So I'll go, down very much. Divorced or remarried Catholics, non-heterosexual Catholics, widows or the people who've lost a spouse, support for new mothers, are women involved in decision-making, and unwed Catholic parents. And interestingly, people felt that unwed Catholic parents were basically the least welcome in the parish setting, which is, either surprising or unsurprising, depending upon who you know and what your parish is like. But things like this can really be a helpful guide, I think, to people looking to form a ministry, to reach out to any of these groups, or if you are part of any of these groups, to say, look, we need community here to help. Give me some resources to start that.
Did you ever do any kind of research on the thinking of parish priests? Because the two of them really, if you think about it, go together, right? I mean, in order for you to take this and develop strategies and get people to start thinking about changing, etc., you also have to look at the milieu, and the thinking, the socialization of the priest. I mean, we're very fortunate with Father Kelly, who is, a few flaws, but, but, he's open, he's welcoming, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, just like you, I've been to many, many different parishes and left this one and said, this guy is, and no disrespect, but, he is stuck in the mud. So, you have to also work on that piece of it as well, socialization of the male mind. Until we start getting women more in the higher level positions in the Catholic Church, ordained, etc., you're still going to have that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think CARA does some surveys of priests separately. This is our first survey. This is our first attempt at this. We hope to do other surveys of either other groups or maybe make this a benchmark and do this again in a couple of years and see how thinking has changed. But no, you're absolutely right. This is not, I'm actually very encouraged to see a mixed gender group here tonight, because a lot of people think, oh, women in the church, oh, well, that's like a nice little topic for women to talk about amongst themselves over tea or something. And that's not the case. I mean, tea is lovely. I love tea, but it's something that should be vital to everyone. And one of the interesting things in terms of trends is that I just spoke to a historian who mentioned that for the first time, Catholic women are disengaging with the faith at a higher rate than men. And women have always, historically, traditionally been the people who pass on the faith to their children, and not to say that fathers and men don't play a role in that, but have been the people who have sort of traditionally directed the faith lives of their children. And that is increasingly not the case. And interestingly, it is also, it is a Catholic issue, because the numbers were not the same for Protestant women. So that the Protestant women still were engaged at a higher rate than the men, whereas it was not the case with Catholic women. So it is a specifically Catholic issue. And the historian who spoke to at Notre Dame, her name is Kathleen Sprouse Cummings, described it as a crisis point. She said, this is like, we need to do something, because, it's a cliche almost, but she's like, if you lose the women, you're going to lose the faith. You're going to lose the church. It's so crucial. Forget about vocations issues, forget about all that. This is the problem. Yeah.
When I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to be an altar server because I was a young girl. And I'm still slightly bitter about that, but I feel like I'm reliving that whole thing now with this discussion about women as deacons. And I'm really, really disappointed to hear that Catholic women, that there's like a significant percentage of Catholic women who don't feel that women should be deacons in the Catholic Church. When I challenged that as a kid, I wasn't really given, maybe because I was a kid and they didn't feel that they could engage with me at that level, I wasn't really given a reason that I felt was valid for not being an altar server. One of the reasons was because you can never be a priest, so what's the point of being an altar server? What is the reason, what is the church's reason for why women can't be deacons, and what is the reason that there are women who feel that women can't be deacons?
In 2 seconds.
I think that, so there's a couple questions that the church, this Commission on Women Deacons is looking at, is were there women deacons? What was the role of those women deacons? And what does that sort of mean for the church today? Is that a role that can be filled sort of in other ways? And, you can, Jane, elaborate and correct me if I'm going off course here. There were historically women deacons. We know that. This is a fact. And so I think the question then becomes, what was that role? And historically, some people feel it was, very similar to what we conceive of as the male deacons today. And some people feel like it was a different sort of role that doesn't translate into an ordained role today. Would you add any more to that?
I think there's a question about whether or not it was an ordained role.
Right. Yeah. So then the question is, they were there, but they weren't ordained, so they don't get to be ordained now. And I think a lot of women still don't. In the survey, some people were like, I don't know what this is about, and I want to know more. So not everyone who didn't say yes was saying no. They wanted to learn. So if you add those up, I think it's about 2/3 of women who either wanted them or wanted to know more or weren't sure about that. And I feel you on the altar server thing. I got to be an altar server when I got to 6th grade. They finally instituted them in our parish, and honestly, I think it's such a wonderful way for young people to engage in the faith in a way that taught me so much that I still really value and have lessons from. And yeah.
I think this is a little worse though, because it seems like the bishops are okay with us doing the work, they just don't want us to have the title. And that's very...
That is actually what the data says. Yeah, I mean, like those statistics say we would love people to help out with ministry of the word, with charity, with all and charitable ministries, literally all those three things. The majority of bishops are like, great, we would love that. Then the majority of bishops were also said, as long as they're not women deacons.
I
Could I
think
just
Leo,
ask a clarifying thing?
okay, then Leo and then...
Was there an opportunity for women to elaborate on that question, when that was asked, as there was in that other question?
Right. No, I don't think that one had a free response.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. The question of racism, the conversation has shifted significantly from, am I racist? Am I not racist? Are we, as a community, racist? Are we not? To, are you anti-racist? Are you actively working against racism? So just thinking practically about parish resources, or if America wants to do something very useful practically for like parishes, it might be taking an anti-sexist kind of checklist. Does your parish use gender-inclusive language? Does your parish have women or girls as acolytes? How often? How many women are maybe on the staff? I don't know. You got to think about these questions, but how? Anyway, I'm not going to cover the list here, but just taking this from, am I sexist or are we sexist, to are we anti-sexist? Because that just shifts the paradigm radically, and I think we could learn from the question of race and that shift on the question of sexism as well.
Yeah, thank you. That's really useful. That's kind of plays into a little bit of the Ignatian examine idea, kind of looking at your day, looking at how you behave, looking at where you find God and where it's hard to find God.
We have our traditional swag bag for Carrie, which is over here. Thank you. Thank you.